Hello everyone, it's Mahtisoni for AlphaHUD. This video will explain you what the long-awaited patch will include and how to make the best use of the reworked AlphaHUD. So, welcome to the video. The usage itself isn't going to be any more difficult than it has been before, just that there's been a lot of little tweaks as well as a couple of massive ones that completely change the way a few things are done. But worry not, it's not going to be any more difficult than it has been before. I'll start with the small changes. Just open up a replayer window where I have a large sample on a player. Now, there's been Caddy Spark and Caddy Scatter has been available for quite some time, and they are essentially graphical representations of villains' ranges. So I've added that feature to basically everywhere where a range is included. So, for example, the Open Shove 7 Big Blind pop-up is now, instead of just showing the whole cards that you used to only see, now you can also see a graphical representation of the range. Basically, the yellow here is some kind of a population average range. I wouldn't give too much emphasis on this yellow bar here that you can probably barely see due to the video colors, but it's there. You can check for yourself in your own screen, but basically you can see if something, you can quickly see if something is here. For example, you can see that somebody shoves any two without having to search for the info here. So it's just quite a bit easier to see. Also, now there's a pop-up within a pop-up. Now if I stop my mouse here over the text range, you can see a grid of whole cards that has gone to showdown. This is Caddy Spark, and it's a pretty neat new addition. I've added it, as I said, right about everywhere where a range is included. For example, 5 big blind shoving range is the same, and also let's see if I have a sample on check raise. Yes, I have check raise wet flop top set here. This is not a very good example, but you can see a graphical pie chart representation if the multiple hands have gone to showdown. So you can see a percentage of air sets and stuff, so on and so on. Let's see if we can find an example of that later on. Next up is the Caddy Scatter, and that is mostly used in the continuation bet pop-up. It looks rather familiar from left to right, if you just that there's the Caddy Spark has been added just like before. This is actually a good example as well of the pie chart representation, because here you can now see a pie chart of middle pair, ace high, under pair, flush draw, so on and so on and so on. So you can quickly see a distribution of how often he's had a hand or no hand. And as you can see, this player has only had air once, so whenever he c-bets out of position, I have a strong reason to believe that I should, believe him and put him on a strong hand. But the main thing now is the Caddy Scatter, and this is a graphical representation of how well his bet size corresponds to his strength of the hand. And this player is a really good example of somebody who, I guess you could call it some kind of balancing, that he never really changes his bet sizing much. So whether he has a strong hand or a weak hand, he has roughly the same relative bet sizing. The neat thing with this pop-up is that if you have all the time in the world, you can actually look at the actual hands here by hovering the mouse over the little green dot. So here, for example, he's made a bet of can I see the bet size actually? Let's see. Yeah, he's made a 0.44% of pot bet. You can get the hand is basically shown here. It's 6-handed, and he had ace-7 offsuit, and he didn't hit the board. He c-bet anyway, and this is the low strength of lower end of the strength, his range that he's been c-betting out of position. And here you can see that he has also made it with middle pair top kicker, and he has also made it with top pair strong kicker, and so on and so on. So if you have all the time in the world, you can go through these, and this is mostly, I would say, for offline analysis. But these dots, if they, for example, if they are very much like this, like horizontally, it means that his bet sizing he has a constant bet sizing regardless of his hand strength. Whereas if the dots would be like this, if they would be following a rising curve, it would be a strong indication that whenever he bets small, he has air, and whenever he bets big, he has a hand. Some people will be like that, so that's why the caddy scatter can be very, very powerful. Now, on to the more complex stuff. So, when I first made AlphaHUD, the first things that I implemented were the 3-bit versus position warning badges, as you can see here. They look exactly the same as before, but the way they function is now different. Previously, in the original AlphaHUD, I had handcrafted ranges that would trigger the badges to show up. That's a pretty good solution if you're happy with something that works in a specific way and don't want it to adapt to your own games at all. But now, thanks to some recent updates to the Node Caddy system that I was able to get implemented, it actually now works as a function of your own database. What that means is that Node Caddy will now calculate an MSR number, what I call them. MSR stands for minimum strength relative, and these badges are now shown as a function of that number. It's best explained by examples. So, for example, for this player here, who we have a rather large sample for, we have 4 yellow badges, which means that, as before, it still means that he's slightly wider than average on versus button, cutoff, mid position, and early position opens. And if we click open the pop-up, it doesn't show you the range anymore. It shows 3-bet versus button MSR. This is minimum strength relative. And the key number here is this 0.91. And that's really the only thing that is available here behind this pop-up. And it's also the only number which will determine whether the badge is shown or not. What the minimum strength relative number means is it calculates the worst hand. It takes account the worst hand that the person has shown up with in a certain scenario. For example, here, the worst hand he has shown up versus a button open, we can see the range from here, has been pocket deuces. And one might say that, oh, there's nothing so special about 3-betting pocket deuces. And no, it's not much wider than average, but it is wider than average, because that's also one variable of the formula. So instead of showing you the range here, which I wish was possible, but unfortunately it's not due to a technical limitation, it shows you the relative strength number of his worst hand in this given scenario. And what does the relative mean there? Well, if the person here behaves exactly like the average person in your database, all his minimum strength relative numbers will be exactly 1. For this person, his relative strength number, minimum strength relative versus button is 0.91, versus cutoff is 0.96, versus mid position 0.98, and versus early position 0.91. So what this means that he is generally ever so slightly wider than the exact average person in my database would be. So if he was exactly average, all these numbers would be 1. And I'll show you in more detail soon what exactly that means. If it was much higher than 1, it would mean that this person is a lot tighter than the average person in my database. Clear example can be shown like this. Let's open NoteCaddy. For some reason it's taking a little time now. 3-bit versus button here. In order to see everything that you need to see, you will need to have the average column visible, and you can make it visible by right clicking here and then show column chooser, and then you can just drag the column whatever you need wherever you need it. So if you don't see the average, you need to see it in order to make this work. Disregard the average strength. You don't really need it for anything, and I don't really like the way it's calculated, so that's not something we want to be using. But this is the Synago 3-bit versus button. This is the definition that is used. The average 17% here. This means that on average, when given a chance, on average, a person in your database will 3-bet 17% of the time. And if the worst hand that a person has shown up to 3-bet with corresponds exactly to that 17%, the MSR number is exactly 1. But because, and this is using Sklansky-Chupukov hand rankings, that's a key information as well. But because Zol31 here has shown up with pocket deuces, which is slightly wider than 17% with regards to Sklansky-Chupukov would be, hence he's given the 0.91 MSR number. If somebody shows up with something absolute garbage here, like 7 deuce offsuit, this would be like 0.1, something like that, or 0.04 or something like that. And if somebody has only ever shown up with pocket aces, it's going to be 1.50 something probably. So whenever someone is exactly average, the MSR number will be exactly 1. Whenever somebody is wider than average, it will be below 1. And if somebody is tighter than average, it will be above 1. So 1.00 here is really the comparison to which you should think in your head, that if this is lower, then he's slightly wider than average. If it's higher, he's tighter. Of course, this only ever accounts for hands that went to showdown. So it doesn't have anything to do with frequencies, because it takes so much time to get any kind of a sample versus positions as a function of frequency. Then it's not considered at all. So this only considers showdown hands, this number here. All right. You might be asking, why did I change this? Because if it's a little bit more complicated, it is because this average here will be very different depending on whether you're playing $7 regular speed 18-mans or whether you're playing $200 6 max hypers. So the average behavior of your opponent will vary as a function of what games you play, and the previous system did not take that into account at all. So this is why I've changed it. Now the way you use it is a little bit just like before. The badges are only shown as a function of showdowns, and these are the warnings that, hey, this guy is a little bit wider than average. The range itself, you're now going to have to check from behind the 3-bit pop-up. But if you want, because it's like I never really do this myself. I only look at the badges themselves, because that gives me all the information I need. I know that, okay, this guy is slightly wider, or if it's red, I know it's much wider. This is all explained in the badges explained document that I've updated. So for MSR values of 0.85 to 1, the yellow badge is shown, and then if it's below 0.85, the red badge is shown. So, and if it's above 1, nothing is shown. So basically works the way it did before. It's just now acting based on your own database, and you have to check the exact range from behind another pop-up. But that's really the only thing that has changed. So I'm pretty sure people will get used to it pretty well. Now for another MSR thing. The call big blind versus small blind shoves badge has changed appearance, and it has changed function as well. It used to be a yellow C or red CL badge. Now it's BB, and it works with the minimum strength relative number as well. So AlphaHUD will calculate the minimum strength relative, or the average range that people call you with, 10 big blinds deep, 9 big blinds deep, 8, 7, 6, and so on and so on. And then if somebody then the MSR numbers are calculated as a function of that average, just like with the 3 bets. And here this player is once again slightly wider than the average, and thus a yellow BB badge is shown. I will show you another example of somebody who is tighter pretty soon, but it's calculated exactly the way it is for the 3 bets. I'm just going to show you that there is the updated descriptions of these. This is all explained in detail in the first one, as well as the call big blind versus small blind shove badges. So you should really go ahead and take some time to read this through with some thought, so you'll understand how exactly this works. Once you get the hang of it, it's going to be very easy to use, because nothing really changed much. Nothing really changed much, and it just now works as a function of your population of your database. Now, just a couple of more examples on how the BB yellow and red and blue potentially BB badges are used. If you think that usually 10 big blinds deep, it's okay to shove, let's say, any ace, any suited king, any Broadway, any pair, any strong suited connector, sort of a thing. If you think that that's good in your versus your opponents in general. Now, if this guy shows that he's capable of calling shoves much wider than that, then or a little bit wider than that, you don't necessarily need to adjust much, but maybe you can take away the very worst hands from your range. What is a good idea to shove, you can actually determine pretty easily by checking the averages here, because the average frequency that in my database here people call shoves blind versus blind 10 big blinds deep is 27. So essentially this MSR number here means that this person calls with right about 29-30% of the time when you shove, or is capable of that depending on the opponent. So I can't assume that he calls 27%, but I have to assume that he calls, like, let's say 30%, and then adjust my range as a function of that. So this is how you can really use it. Now for a little example on somebody who has a different color. Here we have a player who not only has a red BB badge, but he also has red small blind badges, like his MSI number is 0.73, which means that the bottom of his range versus small blind is Queen 4 suited, which is significantly wider than your average would be, so thus his MSR number is well below 1. And because it's lower than 0.85, that's why the red badge is shown instead of the yellow. And here he's called shoves blind versus blind, both 7 and 5 big blinds deep. He has shown that he has called with significantly wider hands than people usually do, thus the red badge, and you'll need to adjust accordingly. Right now there is nowhere where you can actually see the ranges. I will add that in the future, but for now this is a very good indication already of how he calls. And you have note that the weakest of the MSR numbers behind this call blind versus blind will take priority. So if, for example, the same player has 10 big blinds deep has an MSR number of 1.30, because he only has one sample in your database where he called your shove with ace queen, which is perfectly normal. That MSR number is 1.25, but then he has 5 big blinds deep, he has an MSR number of 0.82. Then the lower the MSR the lowest MSR number of all MSR numbers available will determine the the color of the badge shown. So the widest relative always takes priority. So I'm pretty sure you're gonna like these a lot, because these reflect how the people in your games play. And once you get used to it, I'm sure you will absolutely love these. But it takes a little bit time of getting used to. Now, one more example of somebody who has a blue one. This guy here has a blue BB badge, and he has MSR numbers of 124, 138, 115, 131, and none of these numbers is below 1. This is a very strong read that this person is not capable of calling shoves blind versus blind wide enough. You can probably shove any 2 at his face, even 10 big blinds deep, and no problem, and you can make profit on it. So if you see a blue BB badge on anyone, you gotta shove wide into him. Otherwise you're leaving value at the table.